I think that the cuts on corporation tax are missing a point because we need that money. We need that money at the moment.
Would you reverse it?
Hold on. Inheritance tax.
Would you reverse them?
I think that at the moment, the cuts in corporation tax, the cuts in inheritance tax, the cuts in capital gains tax.
But what's the cut in capital gains tax?
But what's really important, Andrew...
No, excuse me, I'm asking you a question.
Cutting at a time where we need those services and people need those services is the wrong decision to make.
But I'm asking you, would you reverse the cut in corporation tax?
But I'm telling you, Andrew, that our priority is
you're not telling me the question.
I am.
If you've ever felt let down by a politician's empty promises, you're not alone. Andrew Neil's recent interview with Angela Rayner has struck a chord with voters across the UK, exposing the gap between Labour's words and their ability to deliver. As we dissect this pivotal moment, ask yourself, how many times have you heard grand promises from Labour only to be left wondering about the detail?
What would Labour do?
Well, we've already talked about, I mean, some of the taxation decisions that the government have made around inheritance tax, capital gains tax, corporation tax, where you've given away money. Okay. This is what Jeremy was talking about in Prime Minister's question today. We treat our older people at the moment like dogs. It's a disgrace. We shouldn't do that.
But, excuse
we should
me,
be investing and putting the money in the primary care
Would you
services.
reverse the cuts on corporation tax?
You've given away money that actually, quite frankly, we need to spend. And it's not just about an ageing population. That is phony. People know about the ageing population for some time. We've cut the criteria so people can't get community care.
This video will show you why your skepticism might be more justified than ever. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. As the interview went on, Neil slowly destroyed Labour's economic credibility. He pointed out big problems with their tax promises and spending plans, which made people wonder if Labour had even done their homework. Rayner's answers became less clear, which was a clear sign that Labour's economic plan was based on sand.
They did that as part of the coalition government.
No, they raised the capital gains tax in the coalition government.
Well, what I'm saying, Andrew, and
what you're saying is wrong. They raised the capital gains tax to 28%.
What I'm saying, you've cut, and do you know what? Debt's rising, and the amount of money that's going into the economy, you know, you've not made it better. Our economy is worse as a result of 6 years of austerity and tax cuts to absolutely the richest in the country. At the same time, where they've told the poorest people in this country over the past, it is true.
The turning point came when Rayner was under a lot of pressure and couldn't explain Labour's own policies clearly. It woke up a lot of Labour supporters who were watching at home. The party that said they knew everything all of a sudden couldn't explain their most basic economic plans. People who didn't like Labour were quick to point out that their big economic promises sounded good in theory, but fell apart when Neil asked them tough questions. As people watched Labour's economic credibility fall in real time, the stakes became much higher. Neil was ready to take on Labour's housing promises next because he could smell blood in the water. If Labour couldn't defend their capital gains tax policy, how would they do when asked to defend their big housing claims? That's the question everyone has on their mind. It was very clear from this interview that in politics, confidence without substance is a surefire way to fail. It was clear that Labour's leaders were not ready for the details of economic policy and were not in the know. People watched as Neil got ready for the next round and got ready for what they thought would be an even more revealing segment on Labour's housing plan.
We've got to cut our coffee. No, let me finish this point because you've interrupted me and I want to make this point. It's really serious to people in this country that you've told people we've got to live within our means. We've got to have this austerity. We've got to cut. Now you're saying all of a sudden we can spend money.
No, hold on.
And that's wrong because you're spending it.
You're just off now.
No,
let me bring you back to the question. What would the capital gains tax be under a Labour government and how much would that raise compared to now?
But I've told you, Andrew, what our priority is. It's about how we invest in our public services.
No, I'm asking you how you would raise the money.
Neil went after Labour's housing policy because their economic plan was a mess. Could Angela Rayner back up Labour's big promise to build 1.5 million homes? Or would this promise also fall apart when looked at more closely? Even the most loyal Labour supporters would be shocked by the answer. Neil didn't wait to question Rayner about Labour's big housing promise. it. Rayner, who didn't seem to care about her previous mistakes, tried to make Labour's housing plan look like the answer to all of Britain's housing problems. People thought Labour had found a magic wand that would solve the housing crisis overnight when she talked about homes for everyone, from young families to the elderly. Neil, who was always skeptical, didn't believe it. He pressed Rayner for details and asked who these 1.5 million homes were really meant for. This is where Rayner's cocky front started to fall apart. Her answers became vague, which made people wonder who the real winners of Labour's big housing plan were. People watching at home could almost feel the anger growing as Rayner dodged the questions. After years of waiting for affordable housing, while rents went through the roof and overcrowding got worse, families were left wondering if Labour's promises were just more empty words. Then the punch that knocked him out. Neil gave Rayner numbers about immigration that he said could blow Labour's housing promises wide open. He brought up an interesting fact: more than 5 out of every 7 new homes could go to immigrants. After learning this, Rayner had to quickly figure out how to make Labour's housing plans fit with the way Britain's population was changing.
Decisions that the government have made and the decisions on where they're spending current money is completely inappropriate.
So how much would you save?
You've cut 50%. In my constituency, both of my councils have seen over 50% cut to their budget. No. You've told the people in this country over the last 6 years, we've got to cut our coffee. No, let me finish this point because you've interrupted me and I want to make this point. It's really serious to people in this country.
By changing the corporation tax and changing the capital gains tax to raise more money.
You don't cut taxes when you need that money
much?
To help. You should be investing.
You don't know, do you?
You should be investing
you just
in those
don't know,
services
do you?
in our areas where it's required. They're spending, they're cutting tax for those that the richest and they're spending money in the wrong places.
At a crucial point in the interview, Rayner was struggling to explain how Labour would deal with the real need for housing in the UK. The public's suspicions grew as she gave vague answers. Voters were already angry that promises had not been kept, and now Labour's housing plan might not even meet their most important need. As the part came to a close, it became painfully clear that Labour's big housing plan was built on weak ground. Once a key part of Labour's campaign, the promise of 1.5 million new homes now seemed like nothing more than a catchy headline. People didn't just doubt Labour's housing policy, they doubted their ability to keep any of their promises. The interview showed that Labour's leadership was seriously lacking in skills, which made many people wonder, can the party rebuild trust, or has this interview sealed their fate in the upcoming election? Damage that Andrew Neil's interview with Angela Rayner caused has been terrible for Labour. The party's approval rating has dropped to an unbelievable 61, which is a clear sign that people no longer trust Labour to run the country. Not only are there a few bad answers or policy mistakes, but there is a fundamental lack of competence at the heart of Labour's leadership. But voters have to deal with some tough issues as the next election draws near. Can you trust Labour to keep any of their promises? If not, has this interview shown a party that only talks and does nothing? The effects on British politics are very big. Why is Labour not a strong opposition? What does that mean for the health of our democracy? Now it's up to Labour. What can they do to win back the voters' trust? Or did Neil's interview kill them? It's too early to tell, but one thing is for sure, Labour has a long way to go before the public trusts them again.